So, hello everybody, and welcome to another talk. Today, I'm going to be talking with Kalyan ji. Now, I suppose I should go into a little bit of background before we sort of launch into the interview. It's a bit of a strange connection for us. I think, would I be right in saying that we kind of connected through Facebook, wasn't it? But we had a
We did. We did connect through Facebook. I believe I must have seen some of your posts, some of the research you were doing in Rasa Shastra and the images you were posting.
Yeah.
Maybe around the Hatha Yoga project around.
That's what I was thinking. It could be through so if people are interested in that, I did an interview with Dagmar Vujastick, and you can go and see that, which has got a whole thing about the Ayurveda project as well. So there's a kind of a backstory there. That's how we how we connected. So I thought Kalyan would be a really interesting person to talk to, because the more we got talking, I realized he's kind of really frontline medicine, really. He's not just a sort of academic reading books and just trying stuff. He's actually frontline, working in India, practicing as an Ayurvedic physician. He's actually sourcing his own herbs. He prepares his own remedies and has an interest in the alchemical, the Rasa Shastra side as well. So the minute I heard that, of course, you suddenly think, wow, this is really what I'm interested in. So I just thought it would be good to schedule a talk, bring him in and have a little bit of a chat and show some of his images, some of his videos, and just hear his story, really. So without further ado, give us a little bit of a background for viewers, how you got into this, how you arrived at what you're doing.
So to start with, I'm half French, half American. And I've been going to India since I'm a child. I went to India for the first time when I was 2 months old. So India is a long story, and my parents were obviously living in India before I was born. And how did I get to Ayurveda? I guess I always had a fascination for nature and things of nature, collecting fossils as a child, collecting mushrooms in France in the countryside and learning how to identify them and harvest them in a proper way, in a very strict way, if I may say. And later on, I studied in France, and I did law studies in France. And while I was studying law, I felt the urge to return to India and to resettle in India. And I was looking for what I might want to do in India. And it was directed towards culture and language. I was thinking of Sanskrit, I was thinking of Indology, but Ayurveda just made complete sense, as there was also a kind of lack of meaning in life, and I was stuck in these law studies in Paris and everything, and I wasn't really fulfilled with the perspectives and what I was doing. And so I suddenly decided to come back to India, not as a tourist, but as a student, and to go back the stairs into Indian society, being a student, and willing to lend my ears and mouth to a tradition, to be part of a tradition, and to be in a place where I can receive teachings from the ancient Indian tradition, and eventually be able to transmit them later on, and just to be part of this great ancient mystical tradition.
Yeah, it very much does have that quality about it. I mean, that's a hell of a jump, though, isn't it, from being sort of a lawyer in Paris to doing Ayurveda in India? I mean, that's I couldn't think of a more diverse kind of career.
It is, although there's one commonality between both, and that's very curious, is that while I was studying law, basically, you would get to know, by the end of the studies, you study this big red book, the civil codes, the penal code, code penal, and so forth. And by the end of the studies, you would know where to find what in the book, but you would never be able to buy heart the book. And when I got to Ayurveda, after a year, I was given a very thick red book that looked just like the civil code, and that was the Charak Samhita. And after a year or two, I realized it was exactly the same. It was a code of laws. and you would never know the whole code, but by the end of the studies, you would know where to find what. I have to say that the legal codes are organized in a very different way, because Taraxamita's organization is a bit random, it seems, at first sight. But there's one commonality, is lots of reading.
Yeah, definitely.
Deciphering.
So you'd had a little bit of introduction before you went to India, or literally you just went to India to relocate and then found Ayurveda and then found a teacher, or you had some kind of previous knowledge?
No, I didn't really have any previous knowledge. I guess I was exposed to Ayurveda and to the traditional medicine earlier. But I had no previous knowledge. And I was in Europe when I made the move. I was still studying when I made the move. And basically, I applied for BHU and a few universities, and eventually ended up in Jamnagar in Gujarat.
Okay.
And so Jamnagar was the only university that was taking foreigners at the time.
Right.
And I got admission in Jamnagar, Gujarat, and spent 7 years there. It was 7 years studying and living a completely new life, which has enthralled me ever since.
Wow. I mean, that really is like stranger in a strange land, isn't it? That's just, it doesn't get any more bizarre than that. Just kind of.
Yeah, and I'd been to India, I'd been to different parts of India, but I'd never been to Gujarat. And that's not Ahmedabad, which is the capital of Gujarat. This is a small princely state of Gujarat where there's virtually no tourism. The only foreigners that were in Jamnagar were students and a few Russians and Chinese for oil, because there's one of the biggest oil refineries in the world, 30, 40 kilometers out of Jamnagar. So it's a traditional Indian place where traditional Indian culture is still extremely strong.
Right. Amazing. Wow, that's like that's a feat in itself. I remember when I was studying in Sri Lanka, because the hospital I was working at was attached to the local college. So occasionally we were invited to go into sort of lectures, and the whole environment just seemed so alien. You had a teacher come in, no introduction, just open the book and start reading, and everybody follows along. And then there's a little bit of questions and answers, and then class finishes, books close, it just, for a Westerner, it feels so strange. Learning by writ. They literally read to you from the book. There's no kind of like discussion, questions and dialogue sort of stuff,
Yeah, in India, I think in the Indian learning system, you don't ask questions for a while. And when you ask questions, often your teachers will tell you that you're too young, or you don't understand enough to ask a question, or that you can ask the same question in 2-3 years when you finish your studies, or when you're a doctor or whatever. But often they kind of keep you a bit back with the questions. And it was very different in the West. In the West, we were encouraged to ask questions all the time, and to question and to challenge and everything. And in India, it was different.
Yeah, I think when my college in the UK, they had Sri Lankan teachers coming in, and of course they found that a bit bewildering at the beginning, to suddenly have a room full of Westerners and even Indians living in the West, just literally just start asking them questions on day one. So that was a bit of a culture shock the other way around for them. So that was quite funny. So it was what, like a 5-year course, you said? 7-year, 5-year?
I stayed 7 years because of COVID hit in the middle and a few things like this. But it's a 5.5-year course, basically. It's the bachelor's in Ayurvedic medicine and surgery, which is one of the ways that you can become a doctor in India. You can become an allopathic doctor, you can become an Ayurvedic doctor, you can become a Sowa Rigpa, Tibetan doctor, you can become a Hakim, a homeopath. You have all these different pathis, as they call them in India.
Yeah. So within the umbrella of all these different specializations, which are you kind of more like internal medicine, or were you interested in like the surgical stuff? Or I mean, what kind of appealed to you when you were studying?
No, internal medicine indeed. What we would call in Ayurveda Kaya Chikitsa, which is which is internal medicine, basically. The only difference between Ayurvedic specialties, the main difference, and allopathic specialties is that we're not specializing really in systems, but we specialize in kind of patients.
Right.
Or in kind of situations, you know, that we don't have cardiology and gastroenterology and all these different specialties, but we have gerontology and we have pediatrics and we have obstetrics and we have surgery. This is more the kind of division we have.
Right.
And therefore, in the end, Kaya Chikitsa ends up being covering a very large spectrum.
And when you were learning, were they giving you? Did you get access to lots of preparing stuff? You know, the kind of kalpana. You know, actually making stuff, bringing the herbs in and preparing it. Was that all part of the course, or is that something you picked up?
We had Paishaja, what they call Paishaja Kalpana as a subject 1 year, which is basically preparing medicine. And we did this. I was particularly interested in raw materials and their transformation. So I did a lot of the experimentations on my own on the side. But of course, we had this in the university. We were taught all the basics and we were taught how to do every preparation. We had one example of every kind of preparation and we prepared them in groups, and we had books where we had to write everything we'd done and everything. So
and tried them at the end? Were there the students trying their medicine?
Yeah, always. Yeah.
Wow.
And yeah, as I prepared more and more things, I realized that first, it's not easy. As you must have realized early on, it's that there's many. You read a recipe, you read the way something is made. You may even watch a video or whatever, and when you're doing it, it's much harder. And there's small things. It burns. It doesn't stick. It sticks too much. It sinks. It doesn't sink. Or whatever happens. And so I got interested into this, into learning. Into getting expertise in preparations and mainly raw materials, because you spend so much time working with these materials that you really want to work with something that's valuable to start with and that's useful. So this has been one of the things I focused on. And other than that, I just love being in touch with people in different parts of India and traveling to different parts of India and speaking with them, touching the material, tasting it, and discussing the different origins. It's like anything. It's like wine.
That's a good analogy. I like that.
Yeah, different terrains, and there's different subspecies, and there's different ways of preparing it, and there's all these things that actually change the clinical effect of the medicine.
Yeah, I found that was one of the most interesting things after I passed. You know, after I'd studied and kind of finished and was working, doing this sort of internship in Sri Lanka. You'd go and talk to the indigenous healers who were essentially Ayurvedic, but they had their own techniques as well. And of course, you'd be discussing about how do you make this, how do you make that, or what would you do? And it was amazing the amount of substitutions that they would bring into the conversation. You say, well, why are you using that? Shouldn't it be this? Yes, but this is better. Or they would say, you know, if they're unavailable, you can use this, unavailable, you can. And I found that the most useful thing, because obviously plants are not always in season. And, you know, sometimes you need to substitute and understand how the energetics can be.
And yeah, I mean, this is so important. We have to see traditional healers, and I try to visit traditional healers frequently, because they have a very practical approach, a non-theoretical approach to medicine, and a practical approach based on availability and the diseases that are most common in their area. And for instance, I was recently in the Himalayas and Indian side, close to the Tibet border, speaking with many Amchis. The Amchis are the traditional Tibetan doctors of the Sowa Rigpa system. Okay. And so they mostly practice out of Guru Parampara traditions, what they are taught by their gurus. I mean, there's a big center in Dharamshala, Mensekang, the Dalai Lama's Ayurveda and astrology center. But most of them actually practice what they were taught by their gurus. And Amchis have 5 varieties for each plant.
Right.
And so any plant of their pharmacopoeia, they'll have 5 kismet, as they would say in kism, as they would say in Hindi, because you usually speak in Hindi with them. And so you'll have a male, a female, maybe a neutral, a high, one that grows in high altitude, one that grows midway, one that grows in low altitude. So you have all these varieties, which allows the practitioner, in case of non-availability, to go to the next.
Yeah.
But knowing the differences, because there is differences, one is more hot, one is more cold, one is better for so-and-so disease, and the other one is in another specific disease. But so I find this really interesting, and we don't have much of this in Ayurveda. We have a bit, called Pratinidhi Dravya. And one of my very dear teachers and most brilliant Ayurvedic doctor I've met, who's Dr. Bhupesh Patel from Jamnagar, he's written papers on this. He's published on this topic. But it seems to be a late occurrence in literature, in Ayurvedic literature. In Unani medicine, you get this, they call this badal. So for every plant, you'll have a plant that you can replace it with.
I wonder why that didn't get developed so much then, and that seems a bit strange to me. You'd think that they would have certainly all the modern teachers I've spoken to, like my teacher at college, was very good at substitution. I can say at any time, you could go through any formula. You could say, well, supposing you couldn't get that, and he would just come back straight away with oh no, you can use this, that's fine as well. So I think the knowledge is there, but it's just not codified, is it? It's not sort of put in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's definitely there, and one of the ways it's there without being there is that the whole nomenclature of plants in Ayurveda is more flexible than botanical identifications. And so if I were to replace a drug in a formulation, I would look at the shloka, and I would also look at the name that's given in this particular context. Because in different contexts in the text, they use different synonyms for the plants. And each of the name points either towards one of the karmas, one of the actions of the drug, or its appearance, or where it grows, or one of those things. And so I try, when I do replacement, I try to have a look at the name and see if there's anything suggested. For instance, if the name in the shloka is Kantakari, which is usually a type of solanum, I would look for something that has thorns to replace it.
Right. Interesting.
And by the way, Kantakari, since we're talking about Kantakari, there's 2 Kantakaris that grow in the Himalayas that are not the one we usually use, and one of them is rubus family. It's these berries, in French we say mûr, these like raspberries, but they're black.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And they grow wild.
Yeah.
So this is what the Tibetans call Kantakari.
Right. Wow. I mean, it's just like it's almost like you've already got enough to deal with, and then it gets split down another 10 times and goes in another 10 directions. Particularly this thing with altitude is really interesting as well. I know when I was a couple of years ago, I was staying with an alchemist, Swiss alchemist. It's not his full-time job, but he's very good at alchemical preparations. And I don't kind of turning lead into gold. I mean, the sort of alchemical remedies. And he was talking about the different types of aconite. He's got lots of aconite where he lives, and different altitudes have different kind of effects. So he's seeking out a particular type of plant all the time. So I mean, that's a whole new area of exploration, and I'm sure people like you, at least you're out there doing this work and kind of looking at stuff and hopefully cataloging it and passing your information along. Have you got a student you're teaching all this to?
No, not really. I mean, I have friends and colleagues, and and I like to share information because it's a bit of a solitary journey. I'm very specialized in specific things, so I like to discuss things with people. And no, I don't have any students, and I don't have any books or anything, unfortunately.
Time to start putting pen to paper. But I mean, at least you're out there doing the work. You're doing this field work, which is great. So I mean, how do you manage to split between? Because obviously, making medicines is a time-consuming process. So if you're trying to treat patients and make medicines as well, this is why they were traditionally kind of two separate. You had your pharmacy people and you had your doctors, or doctors that kind of split their time.
Or you get your students to do all the pharmacy work.
Your students. Unfortunately, I don't have students. It's just me. But I know, like you were saying, some of these things take a long time. I've spent over 1 year doing one preparation easily, but because time is a factor, and of course we live in a place where weather is terrible, so there's only a 3-month window in any year where you can reasonably prepare stuff. Of course, India it's much better. You've got a warmer, drier. Well,
yeah. I live in Goa, which is extremely humid. Right now I'm in France, but in Goa at the moment there's 98% of humidity or something. So it's a challenge.
Is that a problem with preserving then? Are you getting a problem with preserving, getting a lot of mold and stuff rotting? And
exactly.
Yeah.
So we've had to completely close a room, make it completely airtight, and we've placed dehumidifiers in the room, and we take out maybe 15-20 liters of water out of the few square meter room where we do our storage every day. So no, it's very challenging in the monsoon, and basically we lower production in the monsoon, and we only produce specific things that are needed and that have low risk, and the rest of the year is a much better time. But as you were saying, it takes time to see patients and to prepare medicine on the side. I have a bit of help for the preparation of medicine, and also I've been in a phase of 2 or 3 years where I've been doing lots of personal R&D, and so I've been establishing SOPs for manufacture and establishing formulas that work and that are efficient, and suppliers that are regular and that have good material. So this has been a big expensive time, and now most of this is set. And I'm actually, from next year onwards, I'm going to be much more available for consultation, which is something I'm looking forward to.
Okay. Yeah, well, we'll cover your contact stuff at the end so people can get in contact if they're interested in consultation with you. I was going to ask, what about in those instances where you think something might be specifically, that's the kind of medicine this person needs? Unfortunately, I don't have it. Do you ever buy in from pharmacies, and then if you do, what's the kind of quality like in your opinion?
No, very rarely. If I'm away and if there's an emergency and I think that the medicine can deal with the emergency, I might prescribe a bit of Rasa Shastra. Rasa Shastra. I don't manufacture Rasa Shastra really, and so in those cases I might prescribe, but otherwise I always have the medicine. And one of the reasons is that Ayurveda is a terrain medicine. It's not really a disease-oriented medicine. And one of my great teachers who I mentioned, Dr. Bhupesh Patel, used to say that it's 70% terrain medicine and 30% disease. And so with this 70% of terrain, what you're doing is you're changing the terrain that gave birth to the disease. And with this already, in many circumstances, just by doing the terrain, the 70% of the treatment, you can get rid of the disease or start changing the pathogenesis quite fast and quite easily. And the terrains are, the terrain intervention is actually quite easy. And you often have, if you have your punch rasas, you have bitter medicines, you have medicines that are extremely hot, you have medicines that are extremely cold and everything. So I have my toolbox. And with this, I can deal with any type of terrain. And then if I have to make what we call Vyadi Pratyanika Chikitsa, which is treatment that is oriented towards the disease specifically, then I can usually manufacture it after the patient takes 2 weeks of medicine or 3 weeks of medicine that is terrain oriented. I can hit, if I may say, with the disease oriented medicine by the 3rd week, which leaves me enough time to prepare it. So it's not really a problem in most cases. Another thing is that if the quality of the medicines is good, if you take the shloka in Bhav Prakash for Haritaki, if you just read the shloka for most of these drugs, you see so many gunas, so many karmas, so many ways of using them, but you only really get that when you have the good stuff. So I've been able to deal with diseases that seem to require complex formulations that are very specific and complicated to make. But if you do terrain medicine and you have good quality stuff, you don't need that much of a complex pharmacopoeia. And this is really something that Jamnagar has taught us. And I have a few teachers there that really put me on this. And I think this is the most liberating thing for any herbalist or Ayurvedic doctor, is to know first to be working with good raw material and to be able to modulate its effect, to change the anupana, to change the dose, to change the time of administration. By changing all these things, you can actually achieve a lot with very simple things. Given the thing is of good quality, that's the sine qua non condition.
So are you finding most of the material that you are using is how local is it to you? Is a lot of it coming from quite far away, or are you able to source anything locally?
I'm able to source a few things locally, but not that many. I mean, in Goa, we have Kalmeg andrographis, which is very common and is used by the locals. I source a lot of Gokru, Tribulus terrestris Gokshur in Goa, because it grows wild. There's small Gokshur, so this is something I source. I source Amla, wild Amlas. I source Kuduchi. We have excellent Guduchi. And so, for instance, Guduchi for me is something that makes sense sourcing locally more than anything else, because I transform it from a fresh stage. I sent you a picture, by the way, of Guduchi vines.
Yeah, I'll go through the list. There's a lot to go through there. You sent me a lot. So.
Okay. And so Guduchi is one thing that I'm really happy to source from Goa. But otherwise, some things come from abroad. For instance, hing. Hing, I source hing from Uzbekistan. The good hing comes from Uzbekistan. And the funny thing is that hing is used in culinary traditions in India and Pakistan and Afghanistan, but it actually only comes from Uzbekistan, where they don't use it. So
just purely as a medicine, it's not a culinary. They're not actually using it in cooking. They're just growing it as a medicinal plant.
Exactly. So what I get is, so usually it goes from Uzbekistan to Afghanistan to Kabul, and in Kabul they compound it. They compound it with urad flour, masha flour, and with bubble gum, not bubble gum, but babul, acacia gum.
Gum Arabic,
Yeah. So
try and bulk it up to try and sort of get a decent, because the yield's probably quite, because I know they just slice the roots gently over time, don't they, and collect the latex.
Exactly. They make an incision on the southern, so they expose the root, they dig around the root, and they usually make an incision on the southern facing side of the root, and they harvest it from there. But pure hing is extremely strong. So actually, if you want to use it in food, you have to compound it. The problem is most people in India use compounded hing for Ayurvedic medicine, and you lose a lot of the potency.
Right.
So what I do is I don't source from Uzbekistan itself. I source from importers, but I source basically from importers who sell to the medicinal or food industry, and for compounding. So I source it before it goes for compounding, and this is extremely strong. This is the kind of hing you can wake someone up with, like these salts that because hing in Charak Samhita is in the Sangyasthapan, if my memory is correct, Sangyasthapan Gana, which are the group of drugs that help to reestablish consciousness. So with this hing, you just open 10 grams of hing and you put it below anyone's nose.
I don't dislike the taste. I actually quite like it. I have no problem with it. But a lot of people, I find it a bit too. Even in cooking, they're not so keen. I guess it's just palates. Around the world. Okay, so I was going to ask you about the in some of the videos you sent me. Let's talk a little about the alchemical work. So, kind of, how did you manage to find somebody who was doing this, or is this a traditional? Because you've sent me some videos of some preparations being done, like with the putters and stuff. So, is this something that was done locally to you, or something you had to find, or is this somebody that's specializing in this, or are they a general doctor and this is just part of how?
No, this was my experiment, because I've been a bit reticent to work in Rasa Shastra, because I understand you have to do this under the supervision of a guru who has experience, and that there's many things that aren't in the text, many practical things. And I've noticed this with speaking with Rasa Vedyas. And this was the videos I sent you was actually me making Shankabhasma. And so this was to be working with something that is not toxic, not dangerous. And I went to one of my teachers, Dr. P.S.N. Bhatt in Jamnagar, and I asked him how to do it. I showed him the shank, and I read a few different references, Kumari, aloe vera, and Nimbu, and lemon, and there's a few different ways of dealing with it. And I started doing the puttas. I built the place to do the puttas, and I would go to my teacher each time after each putta and ask him what he thinks. And what he would do is he would put a bit of Shankabhasma in his hands, and he would put a drop of water, and he would see the chemical reaction. And this is how he would tell me if it needed more puttas or if it was done.
Okay. And what was you looking for then? Just the alkalinity of it on the water, so you're getting a reaction like if you did like slake lime or something, because it's basically calcium carbonate. So he was adding it to the water and looking for a kind of a fizz or a.
Yeah, I think he was waiting for there to be no fizz.
Right.
I think that was the end point. Okay. So see, all these small things that aren't in books and that people usually learn from their teachers or whatever. This is the reason why I haven't really got into Rasa Shastra, and I have I just enjoy Kasht Aushadhi, and I feel safe with them. I have good sources at this point, as we were discussing last time. One of my things is, where do I get the good material? I'd love to do anything, but just show me the good material, explain me how it looks like, how it should taste like, or whatever, and then I will definitely do it.
And then the great thing about the mineral preparations are really, you've got something that's ultra stable. So I mean, I go to the beach here and I just collect local conch shells and I use those. I don't particularly use the Indian conch because it's not so, I can get them, but it's not so easy for me to get. But I find, prepared correctly, I get equally good results usually.
Of course.
So, but I mean, there are prescribed norms. They're looking for a certain type of shell, a certain, even the spirals and how they're constructed.
Exactly.
I'm not doing any of that, but I'm just using the base material. But I trust the local. It's a local beach. It's very clean, and so it's a good.
If it works, it works.
Definitely. Funny enough, that was the first one I did as well. So we both started with the first one. That was the very first thing when I was in Sri Lanka. That was my first job. My teacher said, first of all, we do shank. So I said, okay. So I thought I was so amazed watching it transform and go through the whole process, and it really set me up with a really deep fascination for it. Because of the whole.
And the reason why I did it, I mean, apart from all the medicinal properties, is also because one of my very favorite teachers was using Shangbasma in, 50% of patients at a very particular timing in the day. And I wanted to copy, to imitate his prescription and see if I would get similar results.
And were you happy? The end result, he was pleased, you were pleased?
I was happy. I've used it for years, thanks to the stability, and I've always had good results. Often combining the Shangbasma, I mean, always combining the Shangbasma with other things. But yeah, I've been happy with that, and I haven't actually made Shangbasma since then.
Because the quantities required is very, very small, so
Exactly.
you don't need much. That's another great part about Rasa. If you prepare it, you don't have to worry so much about shelf life. It's most of it, providing it's unformulated, has got an unlimited shelf life within reason.
Which makes a big difference for things like gold. One of my teachers had prepared gold basma, but 30, 40 years ago, that's maybe 30, 40 times cheaper.
And I noticed in some of the pictures you'd sent some Googaloo, and I think there was some Harataki. And so what was the story on the Googaloo? Is that, again, because that's kind of like a bit of a, wouldn't say endangered, but it's certainly one of those herbs that's more regulated, isn't it? Because of the illegal harvesting and stuff.
Yeah. So I've just, Googaloo. Few reasons why I've been into Googaloo. First, it's extremely useful. And second, it's when you're looking at pills, and I make a lot of pills because they're easy to consume, Googaloo is definitely the most medicinal binding substance. And it's the substance that has the most pill formulations in the classics. So I was interested in Googaloo. And I sent you pictures because I think it's quite hard to find good quality Googaloo. And I've been scanning India and suppliers that get material from Pakistan for a few years, and have found good Googaloo that is just like uncomparable with much of the market material. I get Googaloo from Gujarat, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, and Pakistan. And in India, it's mostly farmed. It's not wild collected. The Pakistani variety is supposedly superior. The problem with the Pakistani variety is that they often let the resin fall on the ground.
Right.
And it's more dirty, and so the Shodana process is a bit more complicated. You get your filters get a bit more jammed, but otherwise the Pakistani variety often has a slightly greenish tinge in the transparency, while Indian varieties have either a yellowish or reddish tinge. I always go for transparent material where you can see the drops, when they're visible, you can see how the resin came out. And I like Googaloo when it has a strong smell. For me, it has the smell of unripe mango or something. It has one of those beautiful, very fragrant smells. And so Googaloo has been a great challenge. And I can get Googaloo in a 5 or 6-fold price range or more. So very cheap and quite expensive material, and there's a hell of a difference between both, I have to say.
Yeah, same. I mean, I literally, I'm down to my last stocks now, but I bought a lot from Sri Lanka about 10 years ago, and I've been gradually using it up. So, I'm down to the last couple of bags now. Where I'll get it from after that, I don't know. But I mean, when I'm sort of demonstrating for students, that's the one that they really love to see, because somehow they really connect with that one. I guess it's because it's somewhere between the two. It's got all these kind of alchemical connotations, but at the same time, it's very much a plant. So they seem to be able to cope with that more, because they're used to that kind of plant environment rather than mineral metals and gemstones and things.
And the smell is so wonderful. The smell of Googaloo. I also like working with things that have amazing colors, smells, shapes, and things like this. And Googaloo, I have to say, is really something that's pleasant to work with.
I think they describe one of the descriptions. Is it that it's like the eye of the? It should be like the eye of the cow or something, shouldn't it? It's like
Buffalo.
a browny, yellowy kind of color.
Yeah, buffalo.
Yeah,
Mahisaksha.
buffaloes. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Mahisaksha. And it's
Buffalo
funny
Google.
because even in Hindi, so Mahisaksha is the Sanskrit, and in Hindi they say Besa Google, and base is also the buffalo. So yeah, somehow it's very related to the eye of the kind of transparency and tone you get in the eye of the buffalo, I would say.
And what sort of preparation method are you doing for purification? Are you doing more steaming, or are you doing kind of like more boiling, or are you doing, there's this one where they steam and then put it on the wooden board and then separate it out with ghee. Have you tried any of those different?
I've tried many, and I've come to, I don't use Potli. I use, it's quite hybrid. There's many, it's a bit of a hybrid between a few of those techniques, but I don't use Potli and I don't use the boards. I basically, even I apply heat for limited amounts of time, and I just do dissolving, filtering, and decanting, basically.
Yeah, I mean, there are lots of different. There's no one prescribed. I mean, I get a lot of emails. I put a video up about how to purify Shilajit. I get loads of people complain at me saying you shouldn't heat this. This is not blah blah blah. But it does say in Charaka, it gives you two methods. You can just do the dissolving, or you can do the Agni Tapta. You can both are fine. But I keep explaining to people it's not practical for me to do the evaporation process in Europe. There's just no sun. So it's like
you cannot do Surya Tapi unless you're in the Himalayas, because you don't get enough radiation. You don't get enough sun radiation, I think, where we are. And I think Surya Tapi is really best in the Himalayas. For Shilajit, I also do a mixed technique, and I neither use Surya Tapi nor Agni Tapi. I kind of use a bit of Agni Tap, but I don't cook it for very long. And
I tried a friend of mine just out of curiosity. He said, "Could you prepare some Shilajit Rasayana?" With this technique is you basically boil it 7 times in cow urine and then boil it 7 times in Gaduchi. And then you do a filtration process, and it was a hell of a job to do it. It literally took me 2 or 3 weeks of boiling, and I mean, I ruined so many clothes because now they just smell of cow urine. So I ended up putting away a wardrobe full of clothes. But the end result, I have to say, was very, very good. I was very, very pleased with it. It was way better than anything I'd done before. So just as a purification process, I would now even consider that to be one of the things that I would apply regardless of how I was going to use it, just because the end potency had increased so much. I was really pleased. There was a little bit of loss, which I don't really get if you do like Triphala, but this other method, there was more of a loss. Maybe the salts and the cow urine and the it's quite strong. I mean, that's quite a process. Boiling down liters of cow urine is horrific. Luckily, I have a very good local farmer who's very understanding and collects liters and liters of it for me, and he doesn't ask any questions. He's quite happy to supply it. So he did say to me, what the hell are you using all this for? So it's just a preparation. It's like, no worry about it. Fertilizer, yeah. He's kind of okay with it. He just thinks it's funny. So so that was a great discovery for me. So just going a little bit off path and finding a new direction, and then discovering something new. So you're learning all the time, as you get better at it, and adapting it to different environments, like you were saying. You can't necessarily do everything the same in Europe that you can do in India. So there's a certain amount of adaptation that's coming in. I see that as okay, because isn't the text even encourage us to adapt?
Of course. No, I think that's very good. And what you described with Shilajit is actually one of the interesting things you can do with Shilajit, is you can load it with other solutions, with plants and solutions. You basically load the Shilajit, and the Shilajit is a Yogavahi. It has this property of carrying the properties of other plants to the target place. Actually, this is, just to correct you slightly, this is not anymore Shodhana almost, this is Bhavana. At this point, you're impregnating the shilajit. You're not really cleaning it anymore. After the first or the second filtration or passage with decoction or urine, you're actually adding properties into the shilajit mesh matrix, whatever you call it. But shilajit is very interesting, and the thing with shilajit is that there's a very fast growing market, and that the supply for shilajit has had to keep up with the market, to the point where India is the biggest importer of shilajit in the world. Importer, you know, and India imports from Yemen, from Somalia, I've had shilajit from Tajikistan, from Russia, from many places, and you get all these different things. I'm sorry, but these stones are all different, and they come from very different places. And I'm sure, apart from fulvic and humic acid, which are found in all of these things, they have very different things. And some of them, I suspect, don't really come from high mountains, but come from caves. And because when I receive material, I can kind of see, especially when I crush the material and I look at the powder, and then when I put it in solution and filter it and decant it and look at the different layers and look at the kind of matter I find when I filter it, I can tell where it comes from. If it comes from a mountain, if it comes from a kind of gufa cave, what kind of terrain, if it's very mineral, if it's very organic, if there's presence in certain cases of fossilized stools of certain animals or things like this. So I think there's great diversity in shilajit, and there's lots of scam.
Have you found any, when you've been up in the mountains, have you actually found any veins or sort of seams? You've seen something?
No, unfortunately not. I've bought some material from people. It's in quite risky places usually. It's far away, difficult, a couple of hours or days of walking often. And I'm told, because I haven't been to these places, that it's often a bit tricky. You have to do a bit of climbing and everything. But I've bought some material, and by buying locally, at least that it's local. If you're in remote places in the mountains, because when you buy from suppliers in Delhi or wherever, they tell you this is from Ladakh or this is from Kashmir, or but it's difficult to know where it's really from. So this has given me certainty on what it looks like and when it's from certain regions. And the rates also, which is an important thing, because if they're selling cheaper in Delhi, it cannot be from the same place, most likely. And how it's used and prepared and so forth.
How about come across the Kapura, like the white shilajit? I mean, people are talking, this is the sort of next big discovery. I hear people asking me about this all the time. What about white shilajit? I mean, I sort of did a little bit of research into it. As far as I could ascertain, it looked like it was some kind of salt exudate from the rocks. I remember when I was going around in the Alps about 5 years ago, we went off on a hiking trip, and I found all this kind of white stuff that was coming out of the stones, and broke it off, and it was quite soft. It was like a bit of like a talc, softer than talc. You could sort of break it up with your fingers. I mean, I don't know if that would...
Not borax.
Not really a salt. If you put it into water, it sort of dissolves a bit, but it doesn't get it doesn't dissolve fully. So I just wondered, the descriptions, I mean, obviously people are using it, know what they're using, and they'll call it like Kapura shilajit, the white shilajit. But I just I've not actually seen an example where somebody said, here it is, this is it. And that's it.
I haven't either. No. And for instance, when I was with the Tibetans recently, who have quite good knowledge of shilajit, they call shilajit buraksun. And actually they use it for very different things. You go to an amchi, and because I've went to them with samples of raw stones, with samples of purified from different sources and everything, and purified by me, obviously. And the first thing they'd all say is, this is for the liver.
It's weird, isn't it?
That's the first thing. All of them. They won't say fractures. They won't say sex tonic. They won't say genital tonic. They don't say for the liver. That's the first thing they'll say. This is a liver medicine. They'll tell you it even works in hepatitis and things like this.
Right.
I hear red shilajit is more of a rare and expensive thing than white shilajit, and I've never heard anyone. I remember having discussion with a few people about white shilajit, but each time the conclusion is we've never seen it, we've heard about it, we don't know any particular uses for it, so we just focus on it. Seems to be a kind of book occurrence more than a practice occurrence, at least in my part of the world.
Yeah, I think that's true with a lot of these minerals. I remember I attended it was a video lecture by a lady in Vienna who was talking. She's specializes in Tibetan medicine, and she was just talking about a lot of the things that she was watching them process. And one of the most important things for them is just calcite. So calcite mixed with milk, made into paste, and then the shakraka, then cooked, and they basically goes into everything. It's like the cure-all. And for us in the kind of rasa, it's a very sort of humble, low-grade preparation. It's abundant. I mean, I can find calcite out in the hills here. It's a very easily found substance, but for them, it's like a sort of a connection to the moon and the crystalline, and that sort of whiteness, that shininess, and something to do with that. And then combined with the milk, it becomes like a sort of very potent remedy for them. So, but for us, it's kind of nothing really. I'm not saying it's nothing, but it's not. It's not an important one. We wouldn't sort of put it on that level for, oh, you definitely need this. But for them, it's a big thing. So maybe that's the same with the shilajit. They have their terrain allows them to have that material, so therefore it becomes an important material for them.
Very possibly, and this is why it's always interesting to travel and to meet different practitioners from different regions. Is also, there's great diversity in the use of herbs. You go to one region, they use it for fever. You go to another region, they use it for digestive trouble and everything. And the only what I use as a key to make the link between the different uses is the samhitas, the texts, the gunas, the karmas, and everything. Basically, part of what I do when I'm investigating a plant or a region is I read ethnobotanical papers, surveys of areas, and I see how they use the plants in these places. And if you look at those, you'll find a great amount of diversity and sometimes of conflict between the use of one plant in different parts. And actually, you can understand the logic by looking at the gunas and by looking at the anupanas. Or also, the other thing is just looking at the diseases that occur in different parts. Sometimes there's diseases that are just don't really happen much in certain parts of India and more in other. But it's funny how local people will have folk remedies are usually very specific. So it's this plant for this disease, and there's another plant for another. Common example is Kalmeg andrographis, which is a very famous plant. I remember, for me, it was mainly a fever drug, and in Gujarat, we considered as a fever bitter, as a cheap and available bitter for fever. In Goa, locals refuse to use it for fever. They say it's completely useless in fever. It's for stomach problems. So basically, you'll have the bitterness, the tikta, that can be used for different things. And actually, tikta will be good for a pitta, or kapha stomach problem, which is many of the diarrhea type of issues originate from that kind of terrain. And then the bitterness can also be used in fever, in jwara. And so Ayurveda and the knowledge of rasas and everything allow us to understand the different uses of plants in different parts. The interesting thing from these ethnobotanical reviews is you'll have doses, you'll have methods of administration, you'll have combinations, and small specific informations that are sometimes very useful.
Amazing. When you're seeing patients, I mean, kind of is there a mainstay of kind of complications that are coming in? Are you seeing the same kind of conditions, or are you getting to treat a wide variety of things? I mean, what are you seeing day to day? I mean, is there a kind of commonality?
I guess there is commonality in Ayurvedic terms. If I was going to take an Ayurvedic point of view on this, I would say that most diseases are santarpanajanya diseases. They're due to excess. That's the main commonality. And therefore, many of the plants that are good at reducing this excess or at leading malas and doshas towards the excretion pathways are almost always useful. Mainly excess in the body, excess in frequency and excess in dose, and the lack of kind of attention to one's lifestyle. I mean, this is the main thing, is that people think that diseases just occur because you're not lucky, or because you didn't take a medicine or
the roulette wheel idea.
Yeah, but actually, the most common thing is that people are often surprised at the effects that come from change in diet and lifestyle combined with medicine, and they're completely unaware of the impact of their diet and lifestyle on their health. And this is the most common thing. And just by working on this and working with certain things, this is why, for instance, I specialize in Haritaki. Haritaki is the first plant described in Bhav Prakash, which is the main text on medicinal plants, on the gunas and rasas of medicinal plants. And the reason is that it's one of the best plants to clean the body and to clean excess. It's one of the best things for santarpanajanya diseases. And Bhav Prakash explains many different varieties of Haritaki, and I've been very, very interested in this. This is the best plant of Ayurveda, the medicine. Buddha holds it, so the Bheshja Guru holds it in his hands. This is, basically symbolically, it makes it one of the greatest medicines of Tibetan medicine. And I was very interested in Haritaki and the 6 varieties or 8 varieties described by Bhav Prakash, and I later understood that they're not all available in commerce, but that there is actually different grades of Haritaki available in commerce, and the Hakims, the Unani medicine, has categorized them into 3 categories, which is Halila. Halila is the name of Haritaki in Urdu. Halila Siya, Halila Zard, and Halila Kabuli. Halila Kabul. And so the Siya is the black one, is the very small one that we use often for Erand Brusht Haritaki, for frying Haritaki in castor oil, and mainly for cleaning the stomach. And the yellow one is the most common, Halila Zard. And Kabuli was obviously the variety I was looking for, because this is the best Haritaki, named after the city of Kabul. And by the way, Haritaki itself, the botanical name of Haritaki, is named after the city of Kabul. All right. Terminalia Chebula. Chebula, Chebulik means Kabulik, means from Kabul. Cha and Ka have been interchanged. And so I've been looking for Kabuli Haritaki for many years, starting, I think the first time I found it was in Karibauli, in the old market in Delhi, which is a quite entertaining spice market and medicinal plant market in old Delhi. And I've recently come to know, so Halila Kabul is basically the big-sized Haritaki, Kabuli Harad in Hindi. And this is what Bhav Prakash describes the best Haritaki being more than 2 tolas in weight. So that's 24 grams per dry fruit. The fruit in the commerce is between 2 and 5 or 7 grams. This is what you find. And so the big Haritaki, I've ended up finding actually the few trees of big haritaki that grow in the lower Himalayas and then in the Himalayas in India. So there's a couple of trees only, maybe 10, 15 trees I know of so far, that yield these big haritakis that are actually in India. And they were called Kabul because the international market for these fruits was Kabul for hundreds of years.
Right.
So my current supplier of haritaki in India, his uncle used to pack each fruit in silk. I can't remember, red silk or
in silk. Wrap it in silk. Yeah.
Single fruits in silk, and every year he would start, from the Himalayas to Punjab to Lahore and to Kabul.
It shows you the value of it if you were wrapping it in silk.
Yeah, wrapping it in silk. And the Arabs were the big market. And to this day, I hear in the Arab countries, there's people who pay very large amounts of money for single fruits of haritaki that are about 50 grams per fruit.
Wow.
Which is, I have some up here actually. But you have pictures, I think.
Yeah, I think you sent me we'll put those up as well. People can have a look at them.
But so you see, I focused on different things on Shilajit, on Haritaki, on Google, on Amla, on Pipli, on different plants from the Himalayas and everything. And I've just tried to get the best and to use them clinically to see if the clinical use supports the theoretical interest that I had for them. And in most cases, it has been supported, and which my attempt in all of this is just to keep the good name of Ayurveda. And I believe that you can only have the results that are described in the classics if you pay great attention to the selection of your raw material and the way you manufacture things. And that is actually written in the classics. And I believe personally that the only reason why Ayurveda is thought to be a slow-acting system of medicine is because quality is low or diagnosis is poor. But now I have seen from my teachers and in my own clinical experience that when a diagnosis is sharp and simple, usually it's sharp and simple, and the medicine is of good quality and prescribed in the right dose, I get sometimes results within hours. In respiratory diseases, for instance, it's easy for someone to say, I had the medicine and I breathe better. So this kind of stuff happens sometimes with extremely simple formulations in good quality, administered at the right time and the right dose.
Well, like I said, I mean, you're a bit kind of uniquely placed for this because obviously, like for me, I have to rely on importers, and I have a couple of people that I use, and that I find it reasonable. I haven't had any issues with it, but I mean, I don't know where these people are getting it from. I'm relying on them to be good importers and source from reliable sources. I mean, I haven't experienced any problems with it, so I'm happy in that regard. But I couldn't tell you energetically if it's like fantastic. I mean, I don't know where it's ultimately come from.
I don't even know about the energy. For me, it's very material. It's the raw material. Is it good? Does it taste good? Is the color right? Is the texture this? The smell when you put it in your mouth? Whatever this is. And where did it come from? It came from actually going to villages and being humbled by their knowledge of medicinal plants and by one distinction that people would make again and again. And they would use an English word and they would say, this is original. Ye original cheese hai. This is the original thing. And what you get in the market is a duplicate. Kind of. Duplicate is a word we use.
A substitution.
Yeah, but what they mean is it's not good material. What happens is all these dealers, they source from many, many different people. They put all the material together. If they have, let's say they have 500 kilos or whatever, there's 50 kilos from 2 years ago that caught fungus. Of course they're going to throw it in. Of course,
Wow.
that 50 kilos is lots of money, and so maybe they're sourcing from 50 different fields. Some of the people, cultivate it well. Some of the people don't cultivate it well. If it's wild harvested, they don't dry it well. I think Sebastian Pohl made a very important point on the interview I saw you made of him, is that most of it is actually post-harvest. Nature does quite a good job. But we can't say as much of men, and so I think this is one of the main problems. And there is no grading. There is no quality grading in India. That's terrible. Only a few plants have quality gradings, but for most plants, there is no understanding of quality grading. I do all my grading at home, so I'll receive 10 kilos of something, and sometimes I can only keep 3 kilos.
Wow, so you literally sift through everything you get. You'll sit and sift through it all and check it, and
everything that comes in, how small may it be, even if it's gokshur, it's thorny, it's small, there's thousands. We go through everything one by one to make sure there's no stone, no piece of plastic or metal, these things also happen.
I know. I mean, even in Sri Lanka, they used to cut the cow dung with mud to try and save money. So you'd end up burning mud. So, I mean, that's just the way it is, isn't it? You just have to be checking everything and doing as much as you can. And
there's no other way. And, first time I went to Khari Bauli in Delhi to this market and faked it because I had no idea what these plants were. I would just ask and put it in my mouth and kind of say, no, do you have anything else, or more fresh or less dark or whatever. One of the things they told me on one of my first days is never buy powder. They said, never buy powder in India. Because you don't know what's in the powder. They told me always buy whole drugs, and you can see them, and you make your selection, and then you can know. This is the only way to know from a manufacturer point of view what's in the medicine. And I give the medicine. My whole family relies on Ayurveda. We don't use allopathic medicine, and I give my patients the medicine I give to my family, and I give high quality medicine to my family. Obviously.
Yeah, definitely.
So this is the idea, basically. There's so many shortcuts. There's so many ways of filling weight. There's so many moments where I've thrown valuable batches of plants or ready-made medicine because there was a problem. And if this was only a business and a tight business on small margins, I wouldn't be able to throw them. I would have to sell them or keep them.
I've had the same problem with minerals, particularly stuff like shilajit. I mean, the amounts of shilajit now, the last stuff I bought just out of curiosity, someone was advertising it and said it's a good source. I got some. I mean, it's all kind of cut with sugar and, so sweet. So, I mean, it's just like, it's a problem. I mean, you just have to go with what you can get. And obviously you're closer to source, so it's easier for you than it is for me. But it's a problem.
And one of the big dangers with shilajit, and I really feel sorry for all those people who are eating shilajit, is that shilajit has, when you get rid through decantation of all the heavier molecular weight matter and kind of muddy matter in shilajit, you realize that there is some part of the shilajit that's in solution that is very hard to separate from the slug, from the mud. And I know that most of the shilajit, I suspect that most of the shilajit on the market has a lot of this mud because it's very hard to get rid of it. And I sacrifice huge quantities of shilajit to make sure that what I have is 100% water soluble and with no mud particles or whatever. I mean, maybe they sell their mud particles as humic acid. I don't know when they label them, but
I tried to just use the rocks if I can get hold of them. I've still got some of the original rocks left that I used, and it's always the same. When you boil them down, the rocks will disintegrate, and you'll end up, when you filter it, you'll end up with lots of things like sand. You've got micaceous limestone. Basically mica, a lot of mica in there, and that automatically tells you it's kind of mountainous. So it's probably okay. But some of the other stuff, I mean, when I've actually found stuff that look like rubber in it. I don't even know. Look at the sort of stuff that you'd seal your windows with. It's like rubber.
I have literary reference. I have a book that explains, a book written in Hindi in the 70s, that explains in the 70s or 80s, maybe in the 80s, how they were already making fake shilajit stone. Not fake shilajit for consumption, for people to purify.
Wow.
In North India, around Rishikesh and everything.
What were they? Did it tell you how they were doing it? What were they?
I remember bibitaki seeds or something. For some reason, they used bibitaki, one part of bibitaki in the thing, and they said a few things they use. I mean, cow urine is usually
cow's urine. The black iron oxide goes in there as well because of the weight. It makes it very black. Very peculiar. Anyway, well, let's sort of wrap up. It's been absolutely fascinating. So, how do people get hold of you if they were had questions, or they wanted to, maybe they were visiting India and they wanted to see you, or so what's the best?
My email, I guess, would be the best way to get to me.
But so no website as such, but you're on Facebook as well, or you have is it sort of like?
No, I mean I have an old Facebook account since the days I was studying law, really, and not very professional. Email would be the best.
Yeah,
email would be the best. There's no website, so forth. I'm afraid to say.
Anyway, look, it's been absolutely fascinating. Thank you for spending a bit of time with us and telling us about your background. And I hope people will get in contact. And we'll just, I'll put this up, and I'm sure it'll be of great interest. I mean, I know I've really enjoyed hearing the story as well, so I'm sure others will.
I hope so. Okay. Okay, great.
All right. Thank you again.
My pleasure.